we've had a series going on all of January. We talked about creating a world that works for all. And by the way, I bought these for everybody, so why don't you wear them and ask people to, maybe people ask you what that means. But everybody has a button, whether you put it on your clothes or you put it on your visor in your car or whatever. And so the series that we've talked about for the last month about creating a world that works for everyone has to do with, the first week we talked about our personal responsibility, that each one of us has the capability and the responsibility to do what we would like to do to make the world a better place. We talked about how we could do that and the power that we all have. And then the second week, we talked about looking at the church's role and ministers' role in how to make the world a better place, to create a world that works for everyone. And then the third week, we looked at our value system, what we value individually and what we value collectively, and how that plays a role in making our world a better place, or not. So today, I had the next part of the series, which is, I call it how we got here, how we got to where we are today as a society, as a world, and where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? So how did we get here? How did we get to this place? We've talked about our world's in chaos right now. Everywhere in the world, it's in chaos. What created that? What started that? What got us to that place? Because, you know, the wise people have always said you don't know how to where you're going until you know how you got where you are. And so I have been studying about how did we get here? How do we get in this place where there's chaos everywhere? We now have people wanting to ban books, and all kinds of people are wanting to keep things just the way they've always been, and yet we have another faction of our population, our society, our world that's ready to move on. So that's what we're going to look at this morning, how we got here and where do we go from here. So we want to look at this morning the root cause of that problem. And it comes with stories. We all have a story. We all have an old story. And that old story comes from our ancestors. And we cling to that old story. And that old story is not working anymore. And yet we are hesitant to turn loose of that old story and create a new story. So we have to identify, what is that story? What is the story that people are hanging on to so desperately that they're willing to create chaos for it? It's because we haven't made a new story yet. And science is doing its best to make us a new story. People who study and teach are doing their best to make a new story. And yet those who have profited in many ways from hanging on to the old story are not willing to let that go. So we've got this old story over here. And what is this old story? The old story comes from fear. You know, we've talked about this many times. We're all energetic beings. Our energy goes on a scale from fear to love. And everything in between energetically is either fear or love, or some form of it. And so there is a faction in America today doing its best to love one another and to see the love in all ways. And there's another faction who can't let go of the old way of fear. It's because it worked for them. You see, those who are in power don't want to give up the power because those in power got powerful because of fear. And the biggest fear was not enough. We have a huge fear of not enough. And that's really just not the truth. It appears to be that way. It appears that there's not enough. If you look at places where people are starving, it's like, well, yeah, there's not enough. That isn't true. We go back to week 1 where we talked about our own responsibility in making the world a better place, and that's because we have learned that what we believe is what we create. And we believe, for most of us, we believe the old story because it appeared that there was not enough, when in fact there was not enough because we believed there was not enough. As long as you believe there's enough, you have enough. So those who are in power have made their living, a lot of money, on there's not enough, on fear, on not changing anything, because it's worked for them. Not making anybody wrong or bad, I'm just saying that's what's happening. If it works, don't change it. And so for people who are in power, they don't want to change it. The example that comes to my mind is Fox News. Rupert Murdoch made a rule, a mandate, that everyone in his company had to be vaccinated. Both shots and the booster. Nobody got out of that. But that didn't make him any money or bring people in to watch Fox News. So that's not what they tell you on Fox News. Because he wants to keep, he wants to keep his ratings up, he wants to keep people watching. So it's a well-kept secret that everybody in Fox News has all been vaccinated and had their boosters. And they can't work there if they don't. They don't tell you that on Fox News. It's that kind of thing, and it's not just him, it's lots of people. It's the people who don't want to find another way to use something besides gasoline and oil and gas, and they're trying to say crazy things about these what are these called? These
Wind generators.
The wind generators, because it doesn't serve them. That's just fear. Fear of letting go of what has worked for them. You can, if you learn how to work fear, you can use it to create wealth for yourself. So that's kind of where we came from, and kind of where we're going, actually, really, unless we start to realize what's really happening. Once we identify that problem, and once we look at most of the things that we're hanging on to are fear-driven. And the fear of of not enough, and the fear that people want to hang on to that are in power, serves them, but it doesn't serve anybody else. And so that's, how did we get here and where are we going? I don't really know the answer to where we're going, but I do know that there are ways to look at this that would create a world that does work for everyone, because we're all creators. We get to create our lives. We get to create our experiences. And it's just like the daily word that I read. I just had to take a deep breath and realize I got to create what today looks like. It really didn't look, it looked pretty grim last night, about 10 o'clock, and I still hadn't gotten anything accomplished. And then I realized I get to create this. I get to create what I want this service to look like. I get to create whether I'm in a panic or whether I'm just gonna go with it, do the best that I know how to do, and make it all okay. That may be the very best daily word I've ever read, and I've been reading them since 1989, but it did, it brought me back to my center. We all have that center we can go back to. We can always look at where I am right now. Am I in fear? Or am I in dominion or control or stewardship over this moment? Am I in stewardship over what I promise to bring all of you each Sunday? I get to choose that. This was a great lesson for me. It wasn't one I actually enjoyed very much, but it gave me an opportunity to really see in the first person how this works. So how we get to the fear and how we get to the old story that we haven't let go of yet comes from our ancestors. What we saw at the knee of our parents and our grandparents, and they saw at the knee of their parents and their grandparents. And they had some very real experiences of the Depression, and they had their own pandemic, and it appeared that they were out of control, and they lived in fear a lot. And we just picked that up. Think about a baby that learns to walk. We don't really teach a baby to walk. We don't say, put your foot here and then put your foot here. We don't do that. A baby watches us and then one day decides to take that first step. A baby watches by observation. That baby learns by observation. And that's what we did. We learned by observation. I learned growing up not to throw away anything, because my parents and my grandparents came from the Depression of 1929, and you didn't throw away anything. And I got in the most trouble I've ever been in when I was 15, because I went into my mother's kitchen cabinets and threw away all the old empty jars and all the old empty things that probably she hadn't used since I was born. And I got in so much trouble. But it only lasted 4 days or so. I put it all in the big number 2 wash tub and took it down to the dump. And she about killed me when she got home. But that's what she had learned from her parents. And I had a new story. She didn't like my story. And that's what happens to us. We start to hear a new story, or we start to be ready for a new story. You've still got the opposition over here that's not ready for this story. Another example in what I was studying was how we just learn how to do certain things. You know, in our country, we eat with a fork and a knife. If you went to Sri Lanka tomorrow, you would eat with your hands. And they would think you were very wrong to eat with a fork and a knife because that had been in somebody else's mouth, somebody else's hands. So they eat with their hands. You and I, all we could think about was how dirty our hands are and putting our hands in our food and then putting it in our mouth. Same with chopsticks. When you go in a Chinese restaurant or an Oriental restaurant, you get chopsticks. And we ask for a fork because we want to be able to get it in our mouth. It's just what we learn, and we learn by observation, and we learn by doing. And anything that's new to us is a new story. And it takes us a while to embrace that new story. But you know, we're fighting it, but you know, the truth is, we can fight it all we want, it will change. It might not change in our lifetime, but it will change. Because that's how we evolve. That's how we were meant to be. We were meant to be evolutionary creatures. That's why we have automobiles and airplanes, and we're not still going by covered wagon and Model T Fords and whatever. We continue to change. And those who bring us to new levels of living are those who are not afraid. Think about the Wright brothers. They were not afraid. Their father was a minister. He kicked them out of the house because they built the airplane and got it off the ground. Because as a minister, he said if God had meant for men to fly, he would have given them wings. And those two guys had to leave home. They were disowned by their father. Aren't you glad? Aren't we all glad that they got past the fear and did it anyway? So where we are today is we're in between stories. The old story doesn't want to let go, and the new story hasn't really evolved yet because we keep trying to squelch it. And so we're in this place called chaos. And if we could become more conscious of that's where we are, we're in the midst of letting go of fear that no longer serves us, to creating a world that can work for everyone by moving up. Remember, it's fear and love. That's our scale, that's our energy, it's our energy spectrum. And all along that spectrum are different emotions. For instance, we've got fear down here. Fear could be jealousy or anger or not enough, or, you know, fear could be a lot of things. And they're all along the spectrum until we get up to this place called love. This is where we're wanting to be. Everybody wants to be here. We have to reach the place where we realize that that love is more powerful than fear. This higher vibration we call love is far more powerful than this fear that seems to be driving us right now. Because this fear that's driving us wants to inflict hurt and pain. But that's not power, that's force. People in power confuse power and force. this that I'm bringing you today, I'm bringing it to give you a new awareness, to have you kind of look around at what is happening and how it's happening. And again, I'm not making it right or wrong. I'm just saying it is what is, and how we deal with that energetically. That's why I brought these little buttons today, to remind ourselves that we can create a world that works for everyone. That vibration is available to us. And we can do it. Wasn't it Margaret Mead that said that 13 people in a room can change the world? 13 people did, who created this democracy that we live in. It's 13 men in a room who figured out that we can have democracy and how to do it. And it has worked for us for a couple of 100 years. I don't know how much longer it'll work for us, but we all have the opportunity to do what we know how to do, to keep ourselves in loving and being loved. And we talked about it that first week. It's as simple as just being kind to the lady who checks you out, or the guy who checks you out at the grocery store. You know, when they're checking you out at the grocery store, be attentive to them. They're a person, they're serving you. How many of us do that? How many of us are pleasant? I know before I learned some of these things at the grocery store, when they were checking out, I was checking my phone until I realized that's a real person in front of me doing something for me, and I need to honor their presence when I'm in their presence. Little things like that make a difference. So, let me see if I'm forgetting anything. One of the emphasis that we've used for the last 2 or 3 weeks is the golden rule, and how simple it is to do for someone else what you would like for that person to do for you. So simple, so easy. How would I want to be treated in this situation? How would I want to be treated? Use that as your marker for how you treat other people. You see, we do get to create this world. We do get to create a world that works for everybody. Because when I create my world that works for everybody in my sphere, and you do the same thing in your sphere, just the people in this room could make an enormous difference in the world. And as you put your love out there and your attention out there, and you use the golden rule for good around you and those you meet and touch, that ripples out. So even though it seems like an amazing, huge, creating a world that works for everybody, how can I do that? You do it as the old story, one starfish at a time. You know that old story? One starfish at a time. The guy was walking along the beach and he would reach down and put a starfish and throw it back in the ocean. They'd all washed up on the shore, and he'd walk along and throw one back, and walk along and throw another one back. And somebody came up to him and said, "Man, there's thousands of starfish on this boat. What do you think? You can't make a difference." He said, "I made a difference to that one, and that one, and that one." He made a difference to the ones he could. We make a difference to those we touch. And it's asking that we be deliberate, that we be conscious we remind ourselves how we show up, how we listen to another person, how we be in another person's presence makes a difference. And when you make a difference with that person, it ripples on. It really does. So, fear is not as powerful as love. It's a very low, heavy vibration. It doesn't create what we want. It doesn't create what makes our heart sing. It doesn't create good health. It doesn't create, when you're happy and you're loving and it just makes you even have better health. Everything that we can do in a positive way creates a more positive life for us. So, we want to look at our old story. We want to look how we might be clinging to our old story. We might be wanting to find a way to create a new story that works for ourselves and works for others. Because as soon as we can move from this old story that we've been clinging to for so long, because our ancestors taught us, as soon as we can let that go and move into that place called the Golden Rule, what I do for others, I would want them to be. We can move into a new story. And that's where our chaos is in our world right now. We've got the old story. We've got the new story, the old story over here, and they're clashing. That's what's happening to us. Those in power, and who got in power because fear was what they peddled, they don't want to let that go. And it's familiar to us because it's our ancestor story too. But if we want to create a new world that works for everyone, we need a new story. Let's all be the ones that create our new story. Let's all be the ones that make a difference. So I'm going to take us into a short meditation, and then we're going to do What a Wonderful World. And I just invite you now to just move into a place of being comfortable. You might want to take a big breath, or lay aside things that would keep you from being totally present to the moment. Totally present to where in your life you may be hanging on to some old fear. We all are, somewhere. We learned it from our ancestors. But we're looking for that new story. We truly are. We're searching for that new story. And that new story is in each and every one of us. It's always been there. We've always been spiritual beings. We've always been beings of love and kindness. We talked last week. This is why. This is why we have a story of a man called Jesus more than 2,000 years after he has died, because his story was love. His story was the Golden Rule. Each act of kindness and love He showed us how to be. He taught us how to be by his example. And down through history, his teachings have never faded away. That's the power of love. Power that speaks to us deep within our soul, deep within our hearts. It tells us love. Love is the story. It's always been the story. It's always been the power. Each and every one of us is in this place, in this room this morning. That power called love is calling us to something higher. Asking us to think differently. To speak differently. To create new stories. Create a world that does work for everyone. That power we call love is in each and every one of us. So today we want to make that commitment to love. Commitment to doing the loving thing in each and every instance. No matter what was done to us, we rise above it. We choose love. We remind ourselves that love creates more love. That we already have a new story. We just have to bring it out, live from it, speak from it, be the example of it, no matter where we go. Be that love we wish to see in the world. And watch how your world will change. Just think of a few ways that you can do that starting today. And know that you do have the power to create the world that we all wish to see. It's in every one of us. And so for that we give thanks as we move out into our day and our week, and we make commitments to be the love, do unto others as we would have others to do unto us, and to make a difference, truly make a difference. We give thanks for that power. Give thanks for that world that can be created with that new story of loving everyone. So in gratitude, we say thank you, God.